Now, I can't exactly remember my first acknowledgement of God, but obviously I know it was from a younger age. One of my earlier memories of acknowledging God was probably at school. I remember myself and all the other children sitting in the sports hall waiting for the assembly to start, and before the assembly started, we would all have to say the Lord's Prayer, which I did, without question. It was the routine that was introduced to us since day one. Now, my family were not really a religious family. We didn't attend church or pray before eating food, and yet I was a believer in God. After all, what option did I have? Because at a very young age, religion is kind of passed down. And like I said, my family were not devout churchgoers, but they believed in God. And so at a young age, I believed in God. If I was naughty, I was told God is watching, instilling a kind of fear in me that I should behave or Almighty God will be displeased. Looking back now, I believe that this was just said to make me behave. I don't really believe that my parents believed the warning they laid down on me, but it worked. I behaved. As I became a little bit older and experienced death for the first time, like losing a relative, I was always told that that person had died and gone to heaven to be with God. And it kind of made that loss a little easier, knowing that somewhere in the afterlife, they lived on. When I was a young boy, I spent a lot of time at my grandparents'. It was like a home away from home. Up on the mantle was an A4 photograph of a little girl no more than 3 years old. It was an old photograph and it was faded, but it was cherished. The little girl was my grandparents' daughter. She had died at the age of 3 years old after suffering from meningitis. I could tell even at a young age that my grandparents missed her with all their heart. And my grandmother especially believed that her little girl was up in heaven with her mother and other relatives who had passed away, and also with God. My grandmother wore a cross around her neck that she held whenever she spoke of her daughter, and the thought of God looking after my grandparents' daughter, my auntie, gave me a certain amount of comfort. My grandmother also had a brass crucifix up on the fireplace that she would look at whenever the subject of God or Jesus was brought up. But I must stress once again that we were not a religious family, and it was a subject that came up very rarely, only mainly when my grandmother was talking about her daughter. And so life went on, as it does, and I always kind of just accepted God's existence, even turned up in everyday phrases such as God's honest truth, what in God's name, God's green earth, God's gift to man, God knows, and such. God was simply there in every aspect of life. And then, one day, as a child, I started to have my doubts. My first doubt was when I first heard, if you don't believe in God, you will go to hell. If you don't obey God, you will go to hell. If you sinned, you will go to hell. Now, as a kid, this freaked me out. Of course, as a kid, the image of hell is fire and brimstone and a red-skinned monster with hooves and a pitchfork. It all seemed a little extreme. Why would God allow someone to suffer because they didn't believe? You see, I had always been told that God was someone who loved us unconditionally, who thought of us as his children. So why would God allow this to happen? It was a question that stayed with me for a while. But as the years went on and I became older, my concern with what God thought of me faded a little as my mind matured and I started to think about things like, how exactly did Noah put 2 of every animal onto a boat? How was Adam and Eve the first human beings on Earth? What about the evolution of man from apes that I had read about? And how exactly can a snake talk? It was things like this that my young mind was focusing on. And then eventually, as I started to take an interest in space, in planets, in the universe, my mind filled up with even more questions about who created it. Now, as time passed on and I started my first job in a local toy shop, I would say that God wasn't all that important to me. Although I swayed towards the possibility of no God, there was still a small sliver of doubt in my mind as to if God may be real. But it was in 2001 that something changed my mind, and I can tell you the exact date, the 11th of September 2001. I was working filling up the shelves with Lego box sets when I heard on the radio that a plane had crashed into the Trade Center buildings. It is true, you really do remember where you were the day you first heard that news. It was shocking news, and we all listened intently, but as bad as it sounded, I wasn't prepared for the actual video footage on the news when I returned home that day and saw the planes hit and the explosions and thought of all the people trapped burning to death or even jumping to get away from the immense heat and the smoke. And then the first tower fell, and then not long after, the second tower followed, killing thousands. 2,763 to be exact, 2,996 if you include the attack on the Pentagon. So many deaths, so many good people, God-fearing people, just gone. It was on that day that I couldn't help but ask myself the question, if there is a God who apparently loves us all so much, how could he allow this to happen? Why not prevent it with some kind of miracle? After this, I started to view the world in a very different way. If God could, why take my grandparents' child? Why allow genocide, beheadings, murder, child abuse, rape, disease, war? And I came across a couple of answers. Either God is all-powerful but not all good, or he is all good but not all-powerful. And then there's the free will argument. Adam and Eve were created innocent and immortal, but God gave them free will. And then that sin spread throughout the entire human race, which brought death and violence. So wherever terrible tragedy occurred now, some believers say it is because God gave us all free will. In my mind, I just couldn't accept this. It just seemed like a cop-out. And a God that allows pain and suffering is not a God I want to believe in. And you might think that I am angry at God, but I can't be, because I simply don't believe that he is real. Or at least this version of this cosmic creator which I had been told about from day one. This God who apparently loved us all. I just couldn't believe that it was real anymore. I started to believe that the Bible in my mind was completely man-made. It was fiction. Of course, I know now that the Bible does have some historical relevance, but I do believe that any mention of the divine or a deity is purely fictional. And I quickly learned that throughout history, the church, especially in the Middle Ages, was to be feared. And in a way, the church controlled people. And if you showed any sin or any kind of disobedience towards the church and their ways, you would face the consequences. And I must stress that I am not attacking the church, not at all. I'm just trying to stress that in the Middle Ages, things were looked at differently. People believed in things that weren't real, like witches, like fairies. And if the church believed that you were possessed by such a creature, you would be cleansed with fire, you would be burned alive. I just think back then people were very quick to latch onto the supernatural. Now, as you know, we've covered a lot of stories on Bizarre Podcast talking about the olden days, the medieval days, when people believed in these supernatural beings and they believed it to be true and factual. And I started to ask myself, maybe God is no different to these supernatural things that were made up back then that people started to believe in. But do I consider myself a complete atheist? Not exactly. You see, I believe that healthy religion is actually a good thing. If I meet someone who believes in God, I don't ram my thoughts down their throats. I respect their faith. Why wouldn't I? It's a beautiful thing for someone who believes. Why would I try and force my thoughts on someone who wants peace and love and kindness? I also want all of those things. But I know that I am capable of making my way through life showing love, being kind, and on the whole being a good person. The only difference is, I don't believe in God, but I'm not ignorant to the fact that I may be wrong. You see, I don't necessarily believe in the man-made God, but I do have a theory that there may be some higher power, intelligent or not, that created everything. Maybe. I'm simply saying I don't know, but I'm open to the possibility. But the God that we were introduced to, I just find it hard to believe in. You see, I believe that if there is such a being, it is something that we simply cannot understand or even begin to explain. Something so big, it's simply unimaginable to us. It's out of our reach. And don't get me wrong, I want to believe that there is something after death. I want to believe that we somehow live on, our soul goes on to something else. I really want to believe that. But of course, there is a possibility that when we die, there is no heaven, there's no God, there's simply nothing. I remember when I was a child, my brother-in-law came off his motorcycle. it was a bad crash and he actually died for a couple of minutes, but the paramedics brought him back to life. A couple of months later, when he was fully recovered, I asked him, "What did you see when you die?" And his answer truly unnerved me, and it unnerves me to this very day. He told me that he saw nothing at all, just darkness. Since that day, I've thought about that, and the fact that he remembers seeing nothing says to me that he experienced that when he was alive, because you can't experience nothing if you don't exist anymore. And maybe he just didn't pass over to the other side. Maybe he didn't see the bright lights that so many people see when they've had near-death experiences, and that is something I will not rule out. That is, to me, a suggestion of something afterwards. It's not evidence and it's not proof, because we can't prove it. We don't know whether the brain is just firing off these images as the body is coming back from being unconscious, or as the body is lying dead. We know that the mind does carry on for a few minutes. We just don't know, but it is interesting how so many people see the same thing. Even before the days of the internet and television, people always saw the same thing: a bright white light, a white tunnel. Does this prove that there is something after death? I don't think it proves it, but it gives it a strong argument that there may be something there, and it's unfortunately the best we're probably going to get. And of course, the possibility of there being absolutely nothing after death, that we just cease to exist, is not a scenario that I am particularly fond of, but I do believe, in a way, we kind of live on forever. And the reason I say this is because most of the elements that are in our bodies, the elements that make us us, was stored in stars, and when those stars exploded, all those elements got thrown out into the universe. All those elements are responsible for making up everything that is around you at the moment and the universe itself. So in a way, I guess you could say that we are all cosmically connected to the universe, because at the end of the day, that is where we came from. That is where we began. And I believe that when we die, the energy that we are made of is simply repurposed, because energy cannot be destroyed. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I am agnostic, or an agnostic atheist, but I don't believe in the God that we have been told to believe in, or the thousands of other gods that other religions believe in. And I think Ricky Gervais said it best when he was on The Late Show, when he was talking to Stephen Colbert. And it's a really interesting thing he said, and I'm going to play it for you now.
So this is atheism in a nutshell. You say there's a God. I say, can you prove that? You say no. I say, I don't believe you then. So you believe in one God, I assume?
In three persons, but go ahead.
Okay, so you believe... Okay. So, but there are about 3,000 to choose from that have been, people who believe in...
I've done some reading, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So basically, you believe in... You deny one less God than I do. You don't believe in 2,999 gods, and I don't believe in just one more.
Right.
So Ricky Gervais brought up an interesting point there. We don't believe in the thousands of other gods that are out there because we were not brought up in that culture, we were not brought up that religion. We believe in the God that we were taught about. So if we were brought up in a different country, we would no doubt believe in a different God. And just like Ricky Gervais said there, that is a reason why I don't believe in just one more God, just as I don't believe in the thousands of others. But I don't say that I am certain that there is nothing. I believe there may be something that we cannot possibly comprehend. Put simply, I just don't know. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, I don't think there is anything wrong with just saying, I don't know. And it may not be as simple as an all-powerful deity that created everything. Even science that has given us so many answers can't explain everything. Like what was before the Big Bang, before time and space existed. But they are not afraid to say they don't know. In fact, some scientists have no problem believing that God kick-started everything. And of course, there's that favourite wild theory that we may be in some kind of simulation. And outside of that simulation, there would be a creator. What that creator is, we just don't know. They say that God made us out of his image. Maybe we are made out of the image of someone who created this simulation. Or maybe the image of the person who created this simulation looks nothing like us, and maybe we cannot even comprehend what they could be. And people who don't necessarily believe in God, let's say the Christian God, people believe that those people have nothing to live for or die for. Whereas I say, I've got everything to live for and I've got everything to die for, just like everybody else. Because when my life comes to an end, I'm not sure what is going to happen after that. Maybe it'll be something, maybe it'll be nothing. I will just have to wait and see. So I've given my reasons as to why I don't necessarily believe in the man-made God or any other gods that may have been invented. But now let me look into some of the reasons why people actually believe in God. Because, like I said, the point of this episode isn't for me to come on here and tell you God does not exist. I've just given you my reasons as to why I believe he most likely doesn't. But like I said, I'm not ruling out the possibility that there may be something, like I keep saying, something that we can't possibly fathom. And the point of this episode is to just look at all possibilities. Now, according to a 2015 survey conducted by the Church of England, it was found that 22% of adults in England did not believe that Jesus was a real person, while 78% of people did. Archaeological proof of the existence of Jesus is hard to come by, although there are certain elements of the story of Jesus that exist in the history books. In 2007, in northern Italy, archaeologists found the body of a man who was buried around 2,000 years ago. And there was a wound found on the heel of the corpse, suggesting that he was crucified, not unlike Jesus Christ was said to be crucified. This is very rare evidence of crucifixions actually taking place in that time period. There were no signs of the nail going through the wrists, but they could have simply have tied him to the cross. And this man was said to have been crucified around the same time as Jesus Christ. Now, they're not suggesting that this was Jesus Christ. They're just suggesting that this is evidence, this is proof of crucifixions taking place around that period of time. And apparently, evidence and proof of crucifixions is hard to come by archaeologically. Now, when you come to the question as to whether Jesus Christ actually existed, it becomes a little muddy. Some people say he definitely did exist. Some people say he didn't exist. But there is actually historical proof that Jesus did exist, or at least someone called Jesus. He was mentioned by ancient Jewish and Roman historians, and they described him as a man who did good deeds, and some historians described him as a sorcerer. But there were a lot of prophets around back then, and Yeshua, which is the translation of the original Hebrew name of Jesus, was a very popular name at the time. And I'm pretty sure I got that translation correct. If I didn't, please excuse me. So these accounts, and there were a few more as well, are probably the best evidence we have of Jesus actually existing at the time, if it was actually Jesus himself. One of the main arguments that there is a God revolves around the creation of the universe. You see, scientists believe that the universe started with the Big Bang. It's believed that the universe began as a single dense point, and then that very dense point exploded into the universe, creating time and space, spreading out the universe faster than the speed of light. But scientists have a very hard time explaining what came before the Big Bang, and that's because it's believed there was simply nothing before the Big Bang, and the universe just sprang into existence out of nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's the confusing part. Nothing. If there's nothing, how can something come from it? I mean, in my mind, I can't even imagine nothing, because generally you need something for nothing to be nothing. Does that make sense? You need something for nothing to exist in. And here is where the argument that God created the universe comes into it. The argument is, if you have a universe that was made out of nothing, if you have a universe that was non-physical, then you need a non-physical being to make that happen. A cosmic gardener, you might say, who planted a seed. That gardener would be God. But then the next logical question is, if God made the universe, who made God? And the answer to that is normally God is eternal. So to me, not being able to explain how the universe was made from nothing is no different to not being able to explain where God came from. There's still no answer. Maybe the universe itself is eternal. Maybe there is a God, and maybe he is eternal, and he made the universe. We simply don't know. But it doesn't end there. that's not the whole argument for why God exists. You see, after the Big Bang, after the explosion of the universe, the suns and the planets came, but not for billions of years, as the universe evolved and cooled in a cosmic evolution. The universe is around 13.8 billion years old, and the Earth is around 4.5 billion years old. According to the Bible, the Earth was created by God 6,000 years ago. And according to the Bible, it went a little bit like this. At first, God created the heaven and earth, and the earth had no form, and it was dark, and God hovered over the waters in spirit form. Day 1, God created light. He called the light day and the dark night, creating the first day. Day 2, God created the sky. Day 3, God created dry land, seas, plants and trees. Day 4, God created the sun, the moon and the stars. And on day 5, God created creatures in the sea and creatures that could fly. And on day 6, God created animals that would walk on the land, and he made human beings that were created in the image of God, of himself. On the 7th day, God rested, and his creation was done. So the Bible suggests that God created all of this within a week, give or take. This totally ignores evolution. The evolution of human life has taken around 200,000 years, not a mere 6,000 years as the Bible suggests. And the Earth is around 4.5 billion years old. We know that now because of science, and like I said, I don't believe it happened the way described in the Bible. I don't believe everything was made in 6,000 years, but there are still people who do believe this because they believe that the universe is so complex, the universe is so amazing and mind-boggling that it must have been made by God. And you can kind of, if you're not a believer of God, if you believe that the universe was created out of nothing, or you believe that something else created the universe that we cannot fathom, you must admit the idea of God creating the universe is a attractive theory when we can't actually explain what actually happened. It is easy to just say that some almighty being created it. So I do understand where people actually put the faith in a God creating everything, especially some of the beautiful things that we've got on this planet. But when it comes down to it, no one will really know the way the universe came into being. No one knows as of yet. We may never know, but scientists are constantly working on the answers every day. And like I said, to say a powerful deity created everything is a tempting thing to consider when the answer is simply out of our grasp. And I think it goes without a shadow of a doubt that the universe was created by something powerful and something amazing. Whether that something had intelligence, we'll just never know. Or at least we don't know yet. And like I said before, even some scientists can only give so much evidence to creation before coming to a point where they conclude this may be where God started everything. Because what come before nothing is hard to imagine. And that is where some scientists say that you have to have a little bit of faith in some kind of divine creator. Now, another argument for God's existence is that we are here, and that in itself is a miracle. Ever since we started to look up into the sky and gain a better understanding of space and the vast size of it, we have often asked ourselves, are we alone? Some believe that due to the universe being so big, unimaginably big, that the odds of other life forms existing out there is quite high. However, some believe that life on this strange floating rock is possibly more rare than we can ever imagine. Maybe we are alone. The Fermi paradox suggests that life should be easy to come by in the universe filled with stars. For example, the known universe holds 70 sextillion stars with planets orbiting those stars. So we can assume that life must have found a way to exist on at least a few percentage of those planets. So, if that is the case, where are all the aliens? Why haven't they come calling? We ourselves are trying to travel out into the universe. We have a long way to go, but plans for a one-way trip to Mars are already underway. And there's so many stars that are older than ours, suggesting that life must have evolved somewhere out there. Maybe evolved further than us. So where is the evidence? There is none. I mean, sure, we have had signals such as the WOW signal in 1977, which was strange and could have possibly been something, but it was never proven to be contact with another civilization. It was a signal that was noticed, it repeated itself a few times, and then it disappeared for good. They've never been able to find that signal again. But it was so amazing, they actually wrote the word wow on the paper, and it became known as the wow signal. But as amazing as that signal was, we just couldn't prove that it came from any kind of intelligent life because it came so quick and it went. So the possibility of life actually existing in the universe comes down to this. Life exists, but it is not intelligent. Life exists, but it is not intelligent enough to understand the things we do. Or there is some kind of advanced alien life out there and they understand perfectly, but they're so advanced they see us as we see ants and they feel no need to make contact. Or intelligent life did exist somewhere out there in the universe, but they made themselves extinct. Or the more scary thought is we may be truly alone, because life could possibly be that rare. And that is again where God comes into it. You see, the fact that life actually exists on our planet is unbelievable, and I cannot emphasize enough how unbelievable it actually is. It is, in no less terms, a cosmic miracle, because the probability of us actually being alive is nothing less than amazing, starting with the Big Bang itself. Stephen Hawking himself wrote that if the rate of expansion of the universe had been smaller by 1 part in 100,000 million, it would have collapsed in on itself, and the universe would not have started. If it was greater than 1 part in a million, there would be no planets. The explosion of the universe had to be so precise to allow things to happen how they did. And the conditions for life on this small little planet are also as precise. The planet has been evolving over billions of years, and there are multiple little factors that have made life successful. For example, the distance of the Earth from the Sun is just right. If it was a little further out, life wouldn't exist. If it was a little further in, life wouldn't exist. This is called the Goldilocks principle, where the conditions for life have to be just right, or no life exists. Then there's the fact that our moon is unusually big. Life owes a lot to the moon and the gravitational pull that puts the Earth on a tilt, allowing for seasons. And that tilt is just right. And then there's the gas giant Jupiter, and Jupiter's immense gravity protects us from massive asteroid impacts. But the ones that do impact the Earth may have carried molecules that created life itself. And then there's gravity, which to us feels like a very strong force, but actually gravity is a very weak force in the universe. But it is just strong enough to form stars and hold them together. If gravity was a little bit stronger, we would have a lot of black holes in the universe and not a lot of stars. Our planet has just the right conditions for water to exist. The atmosphere is just right for us to live, and we also have just the right magnetic field that surrounds the Earth and protects us from radiation. Believe me, I could keep going with these precise conditions that are needed for life to exist. In fact, there are over 200 known parameters for life to exist. If the cosmic scales are tipped in either direction ever so slightly on any of these parameters, there would be no life. And when you think about it like that, it really does seem like a miracle. And who do we associate with granting miracles? Well, we associate God with granting miracles. And when you think of the precise conditions that life exists, you can understand why most people turn to God to explain it. The fact that life exists is extraordinarily rare. So many people come to the conclusion that God must be responsible for setting these parameters for life at the exact right place. In fact, I've heard many people describe it as a fine-tuned universe, as though God has all these dials in front of him and he turns them just to make life exist. And if even one of those dials were turned ever so slightly to the left or ever so slightly to the right, it would make all those other dials redundant and life would not have happened. So some believe that these parameters for life are so precise that they could not have possibly been done by Mother Nature. They believe that these parameters were put into place by a higher power by a god. But there is also an argument for that. You see, some people argue that space may be infinite. If that is so, there should be infinite possibilities. Anything that you can imagine happening should happen somewhere in the universe because there is infinite possibilities. So this could explain life on Earth, and that we just so happen to be here to experience it. The fact is, if we wasn't here, we wouldn't know, and we can only be aware of these conditions because those conditions are allowed by our universe, and we can observe them. But if this theory is true, if space is really infinite, and the possibilities are infinite, so you can imagine anything, and it is possible somewhere out there. So I don't know, let's go crazy. Let's imagine somewhere out there, there's a moon with a face on it, and it's sentient, and it can talk, and it can smile, and it can watch you as you fly by and wink at you. As crazy as that sounds, it's possible if the universe is infinite, because anything is possible out there. You could say, I'm totally thinking random here, you could say that the TV show of the dinosaurs from the 90s, you remember that TV show with the Jim Henson puppets, and they're all dinosaurs and they're all going about their lives like humans, going to work, going to the 9 to 5, coming home, having tea with the family. Just think, somewhere out there, that could be happening right now if the universe is infinite and the possibilities are infinite. That being said, if you can imagine something like that happening, is it truly impossible to imagine that there is a God? And if the universe is infinite, then it is totally possible that God exists, if you believe that theory. When something seems so impossible and so unbelievable, you have to admit it is easy to come to the conclusion that some all-powerful being was responsible for making everything. But that's the thing, isn't it? Is it too easy to say God made everything? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we'll never know. Now, recently I made a post on Instagram and I asked my followers, do you believe in God? Give your best arguments for God's existence. If you don't believe in God, give your best arguments for him not existing. And I think I got some pretty interesting answers, and I want to read some of them out to you today. I'm not going to mention any names, I'm just going to read out the answers as they come. So here we go. Okay, so one of the comments I got was God either doesn't exist, is indifferent to our suffering, or isn't omnipresent or omniscient. Because how else can we explain God allowing children to be struck down by gunfire and do nothing to stop it? So it seems like this guy or girl has some of the same beliefs that I have. Like, when you look at all the suffering in the world, I find it hard to believe that an all-loving God would allow that to happen. But then I was left this comment. The world is too beautiful and too many grey areas for it all to just be chemical reactions and explosions. Not saying how I feel either way, this is just the best argument I've heard. Someone else commented that God exists when people want him to exist. God is an idea for those who need to cling to something beyond, will seek out their vision of God, and they will worship in the associated manner. It's not an unoriginal idea either. Civilizations all over the world created their gods because as humans, we fear the unknown and we fear our morality. I think that is very true. Okay, so the next comment left was actually a theory. Imagine a turkey living on a farm. Every day the farmer comes to the turkey, feeds it and takes care of it. The turkey gradually develops a routine, interprets it as a law, a pattern. This metaphor could be applied to humans, and our laws of physics could just be the consequences or actions of an alien race who is technologically more advanced than us by billions of years, who might not even notice us, and as Thanksgiving comes around, the actions of the farmer changes and might affect how our world works in unimaginable ways. Okay, so that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about an alien race possibly knowing that we're here on Earth, but they are so uninterested by us because they are so, like the theory said, they're technologically advanced, that we are nothing to them, we are mere ants. And you'll have to excuse me, I got quite a lot of responses on this question, more than I was actually expecting to get, so I can't read all of them out, but I do want to pick some which are in favour of God existing and some that aren't. Okay, the next commenter says, innocent until proven guilty, so there's no proof of his existence, then he doesn't exist in my mind. I also don't understand out of the infinite possibilities of what could be, people have guessed it exactly right. Another commenter said the following: I've never heard him, her, or them, or seen her or them. And then he follows that up by saying, it's my baseline for believing in most things. I don't mean to be condescending. People can believe what they want. It's just never made sense to me. And I think this was one of my favourite arguments for the existence of God. I just like how it was written. The chances of the universe being created by its own are the same as if a wild tornado would cross through a junkyard, leaving behind a fully built, working properly, ready to fly fighter jet. And he's right, the chances of life actually existing on this planet were astronomical. It really was a finely tuned universe. But as Jeff Goldblum says in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. Okay, we're going over to Facebook now for the last comment, and this is short but sweet. And it says, yes, all gods exist in my opinion. Nothing factual behind my idea, my own interpretation throughout my life. So that's short and sweet. I think what she's basically saying is she believes in God, but she has no evidence, but she has faith and she believes, which is what many people believe in. At the end of the day, I don't think it really matters what you believe in, as long as your beliefs are healthy for you and for others. You could put your faith in a God, you could put your faith in science, and you know what, there's no reason why the two can't exist side by side, because it already does. And maybe one day we will find the answers and understand our place in this universe. And like I said, the intent of today's episode was not to offend or push anyone's beliefs down anyone's throats. The intent of this episode was to just ask the question. And I believe that asking questions is fundamentally what makes us human. So, as always, I'll end this episode by saying, what do you think? Do you think there's a God? I'll let you decide. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.